So my job, I do mental health work in sports psychology or mental performance work. So my job's split into two categories. The sports psych side of things, that's going to be all the thinking, feeling that we think about towards sport and getting us to perform at a place that we want to perform at. Now, performances can be in the classroom, it can be in theater, it can be with a basketball. Performance is very fluid, and so as we go through this, I want you to lean into that it says sport, but sport and performance, it can really be anything. Now, along with that, we have the mental health side of things, and that's going to be, as we know, mental health. If I have anxiety in sport, that might be solely sports psychology. Now, if I have anxiety in every room that I go into, but I happen to also be an athlete, that's going to be a mental health concern. Does that differentiation make sense? So I wanted to share that as it kind of breaks down a little bit of kind of what I do and how I operate. So there's a big question. What the heck is mental toughness? So I want you to chit-chat with the person next to you. What do you think mental toughness is? It's a word we throw around a lot, but what do you think it is? Alrighty, we're going to come right on back. What in the world is mental toughness? Raise your hand. See, now we're not going to play this game. I heard you all just talk for about 30 seconds there. Now no one has ideas.
Be a leader!
Okay, I hear tough. Yeah. What was that last word? Okay. Okay. What's another one? I like that. Yeah. The ability to keep going. It's like that perseverance. Yeah. Ooh, move through mistakes. That's a good one. Yeah, you deserve some fist bumps for that. What's another one? Yes. Tough but inside. I like the direction we're going with it. Let's get one more. One more. These guys in the front row, they had a lot of big ideas, but now they're getting a little quiet. Can I pick on the guy in the red shirt here? No? All right, what do you think mental toughness is? What's a part of it?
Being tough mentally.
Being tough mentally. All right. We'll work on it. We'll work on it. So the way I think about mental toughness, and this is my fancy definition, so feel free to disagree, but I think of mental toughness as the ability to focus on the right thing at the right time and to accomplish a task regardless of setback. There's a lot that goes into that, and we kind of took bits and pieces of it. But at its core, I think of it as this idea of focusing on the right thing at the right time. Because in sport or in life, we're going to have moments where our focus is needed to be divvied up. Whether it's a fourth down in the fourth quarter and we need to focus on not jumping on the hard count, or whether it's doing a presentation to a bunch of high schoolers and I need to focus on my presentation and making eye contact with all of you. In order to do things we want to do, we're going to have to manage our focus. Okay? So that's a big piece. Like it involves focus, it also involves this idea of confidence, this idea of adaptability, which we kind of got to, perseverance, which someone had mentioned, mental clarity, goal setting. And this is a big one. Mental toughness does not guarantee anything. We can do all the right things, we can be resilient, we can be confident, we can put our focus in the right spot. Doesn't guarantee anything. We can still lose. And that's a big point that I want to get across today, is that we're going to let go of that outcome, because whether we do all the right things or not, it might not matter. What we are going to focus on is doing the things that are within our control. Does that sound good? Does that sound good? Yes. So, talk to that person that you just spoke with. What do we think confidence is? Bless you. What do we think confidence is? You guys gonna be ready here? Okay. Alrighty, we're gonna reel it back in a bit. Come back to my voice a little bit. Now, we talk about the idea of confidence, well, especially in my office, I talk about confidence every single day. It's when I get our paperwork for every new client that I see, I have a list of what are things that you want to work on. Nearly every time, and these are Division I athletes that I work with, the number one concern is confidence. And so I'll ask you, what do we think confidence is? What came to mind? Yeah.
Believing in yourself.
Believing in yourself? Uh-oh. See, now I still want to call on you, but I have the idea. You got nothing? What else do we got? What do we think confidence is? Yeah. Believing in the abilities. I think we're going to come back to that word there, ability. What else? Yeah? Okay, the ability to stand up for yourself. Okay, that's a good one. Can I get one more? Yeah.
Knowing that you can do something that's hard to do.
Ooh. Knowing you can do something even though it's hard to do. All right, yeah, we'll snaps. Yeah, we can do that. All right. So a lot of what you all mentioned goes into kind of how I think about confidence. Now, I think of confidence as the ability to achieve the perceived level of performance. Breaking all that down, it's that ability that I think I can do what's asked of me. And I'm going to mention another word here that we probably talk about a lot, this idea of expectation, that I can do what I feel is expected of me, or I can meet the expectation at hand. Now, as we think about confidence, I want us to also think about it in two factors. Confidence is both a personality trait and a psychological state. What the heck does that mean? I want us to think about confidence as the moment you were all born, we all had a certain level of confidence that came with us. And that's maybe from our parents, genetics, but we are born with a certain level of confidence. It maybe doesn't always stay the same, but we all know people that, hey, maybe they were just born with more confidence than others. We can all probably think of those people. With that, confidence is also a psychological state. Really what that means is that confidence can fluctuate from space to space. Now, if I handed someone the mic here, they might not feel confident speaking to a group of high schoolers. Does anyone want the mic? No, not a whole lot of people want the mic, all right. With that, if I asked you if the expectation was not to speak in front of a group of high schoolers, but it was to eat a soft serve ice cream cone in 15 minutes, how many of you would feel pretty confident in that? Yup, yeah, as would I. To where I want us to think about our confidence fluctuates from activity to activity. From moment to moment, your confidence is always changing whether you like it or not. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now with that, how many of us would like more confidence, whether it's in sport, school, life? If your hand's not up, you're probably lying to me. We all want more confidence. I've never met someone that says, no, Tanner, I am set with the amount of confidence I had. In fact, I want less. I don't see that a whole lot. But on the flip side, too little confidence is a common problem, but too much confidence can also bite us in the butt. Does that make sense? So I'm going to break this graph down for you. So remember my definition of confidence, the ability to meet our own perceived expectation? So here is this graph. And when I work with our athletes, typically we are our expectation is our A game at all times. Whether we like it or not, the pressure's high and we need to win. Because if I'm being frank, if we don't win, coaches might not get another year, athletes might leave, and that means there's less money for the athletic department, and then there's less money that I get to keep my job, frankly. Now, that's being dramatic, but the whole idea is that there's a lot of pressure in college athletics, and this is how I break it down for our student athletes. Our expectations are high, and that's great. Like, I want someone with high expectations. However, if our ability or perceived ability is not that we will not meet those expectations, Between our perceived ability and our expectations, that's what I like to call the confidence gap. That's the gap of confidence. And when we don't have confidence, what might we experience? How many of us have not been confident and maybe we get a little anxious? Maybe our voice gets shakes a little bit. Maybe we start to sweat a little bit. Maybe our legs starts to tap a little bit. I know when I was in high school, I hated presentations. And I would get so nervous. And I would wait every time until someone else would go. And then eventually, I was last. And I was stuck with this anxious feeling. And that right there was the confidence gap, and I was stuck in it. As we look at this graph, you might say, Tanner, why don't we just lower our expectations? Then we'll be confident. And to that, I would say, yeah, if we just lowered our expectations, we might be confident. But also, in my work, we can't just lower our expectations. Because I work with a lot of high-achieving people, just like I'm sure there's a lot of high-achieving people in this room. We want to do great things. We want to get A's. We want to get B's. We want to do things that fire us up. We got dreams. And we want to go chase those. And that's what I'm about. But with that, we're going to experience that confidence gap. And that's not it doesn't have to be a problem if we learn more about it. Does that sound good? Yeah. Yes. So before we go much further, I want to talk about the meat tree. I'll be really quick here. Remember how I talked about mental health and sports psychology? As you kind of think about where you fit within this idea of confidence, confidence can be, as you see at the tippy top of the tree there, all the way to the very bottom, there's this idea of self-efficacy, self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-worth. Now, if I'm struggling to make a free throw in the fourth quarter of a basketball game, but I feel pretty content as a person, I feel like I have worth, I feel loved, I feel cared for, I'm probably going to work on self-confidence, self-efficacy, really working on those free throw skills, those in-sport, in-game skills. But now, if I feel like I'm a person I have really low worth, I don't feel loved, I don't feel cared for, we might need to ramp up some of those skills, just like we would for a tree. I wouldn't expect a tomato plant to grow good tomatoes if the roots aren't sturdy and strong. And that's how I want us to think about confidence. Is in order for our confidence to be high, we might have to start from the ground up. So I want you to kind of think about, as we go through our conversation today, what that might look like for you. Here's another big question. Why the heck do we struggle with confidence? Talk to someone next to you. Why do we struggle with confidence? Alrighty. Why the heck do we struggle with confidence? Oh, I see a few hands. Yeah.
We're afraid what people think of us.
Okay. Judgment. We're afraid of what people think. Yep. What was it one more time? We're overcritical? I like that. Yeah.
Scared to fail and make mistakes.
Scared to fail and make mistakes. That's a good one. Can I get one more? One more? Yeah? There in the back? Yeah, yep. Okay. So kind of what we talked about a few slides ago, we don't want to be overly confident. That's a good one. Okay. So I want us to think about confidence in two factors. There's internal level of confidence, and then there's external. The internal level of confidence, that's going to be like the thoughts and emotions that we experience. I think we can all think about times when our confidence was really high internally. We had thoughts that were hyping us up. We had emotions that made us feel pumped up, and we felt like we were ready to do anything we needed, right? On the flip side, we also have an external level of confidence, and I think about that as like the verbal language that we show others. Now, if I was giving a presentation and I stood way back here and I talk like this the whole time, would you think I'm very confident? No, probably not. But do I look more confident up here? Yeah, maybe if I'm walking around, I ask a question, I use my hands, thank you. So we can see that like our body is kind of like the emotional billboard that tells us if we're confident, how confident we are, but also it shows others, which I think that's incredibly powerful. And we'll get into more of that later. Can you go back one slide? How do you know when you're lacking confidence? I don't need any, I'm not going to call in anyone, but I want you to think, take a few seconds here. How do you know when you're lacking confidence? Is it an internal thing? Is it an external thing? Can your teammates or friends see it? Give a few moments here, like, what lets you know when you're lacking confidence? So as we think about the brain, I'll tell you, I know we can kind of chuckle at this, but I'll tell you, with every athlete that I meet with, this is the number one thing I share with them, and it's the number one thing they remember. It sounds silly, but I'll go to our practices, and I can hear our Division I athletes, whether they are all-conference swimmers or 350-pound offensive linemen, will talk to me about their monkey brain and professor brain, and I'm going to tell you about the exact same way I would tell them. So in our brain, we have what we call the amygdala and the hippocampus, and they are critical in how our body and brain interact. So I'll start here with the monkey brain. Our amygdala is responsible for, I think of it like the caveman brain. It's responsible for like hunger, safety, ego, acceptance, other needed functions. It's focused on all these needs all at once. It's focused on very black and white thinking, yes or no thinking. Do people like me or not like me thinking? It says here catastrophic, but it's very much life or death. Like there's no in between, there's no gray area. It's either things are incredible and amazing or things are awful and how are we ever going to survive this? Here's a caveat. Have we ever caught ourselves thinking with monkey brain? Yeah, you should all have your hands up because you all have an amygdala. Our amygdala processes information 5 times faster than our hippocampus. 5 times faster. So our brain is focused on all these worries all at once, and it's working super hard to keep you safe. On the other side, we have our professor brain, and this is our hippocampus. This is the brain that actually helps you think as you want. This is the brain that you use during creating a budget. It's the brain that you use during class. It's the brain that you use when you're deciding which route to take on Google Maps. It's the brain that you use when you're deciding which bag of chips to bring to the party. Doritos, obviously. It's the thing that focuses on truth and logic and fact. It's very pros and cons thinking. We weigh things out. It's very gray. But with that, it's notoriously slow. And it takes a lot of work to think in this capacity. It's the intellectual, heavy thinking that we do on a daily basis. And now, our amygdala and our hippocampus, our monkey brain and our professor brain, are always at work. And they're always going back and forth on who's in control of your brain and who calls the shots. And you might be thinking, Tanner, why is that? Why do we have our amygdala and hippocampus? Well, I'm here to tell you. So if we want to talk about our brain and think about our brain, we have to go back a long time ago and think about how it was developed in this capacity. So I want us to think about thousands of years ago when there were cavemen, cave women, and life was really dangerous, right? If my daily tasks back then might have been, well, I had to go gather blueberries or harvest the carrots. I might have to go on a hunt, and that was my daily task. That's probably not our daily task today. To where our brain was really focused on that food, it was really focused on safety. And so when, say we were out in the woods, and we heard a growl and a big branch crack. What do you think our body did? We run? We get a little nervous? Yeah. Do you think we'd be cool, calm, relaxed? No. Yeah, we'd probably be scared. Our body would tense up. Our blood starts pumping. We start to get a little jittery. And these are all things that, if we really break it down, these are all safety mechanisms that our brain has had for thousands of years. When your heart starts pounding when you're about to give a presentation, it's because you're nervous, but it's also because your brain is trying to get all the blood possible to your extremities to keep you alive. Because our brain is super complex, but our brain is really stupid. It can't tell the difference between if you're being chased by a bear or if you have to give a presentation. And so we have that same response to whether a bear is chasing us or we have to go up and talk in front of a group of people, or we are in the regional championship and things are getting down to the line. Your brain doesn't know the difference. And there's no amount of talking through that you can do that to make it understand that. And so what we do with that is we have to understand how our brain operates, and whether we like it or not, work with that brain. Because your brain is built to interpret danger, whether that danger is a bear chasing you or the idea that we may or may not make state. Does that make sense? So take a mental screenshot of this picture. This is how I think of our brain operating when things are getting hairy, when we have to give the presentation, when it's crunch time, we have to play. Our brains are going to be going back and forth, that monkey brain and professor brain, and they're fighting over the cockpit on who controls the brain. So when things do get intense, when it's fifth set, when it's homecoming, everyone's there, and we can feel those nerves start to kick in, our body clenches up, we're starting to sweat, we're starting to get jittery. That's your amygdala kicking in. That is your monkey brain starting to work, and it hijacks our frontal lobe and hippocampus. And again, that's the part of our brain responsible for rational thinking, for remembering what the play is in the huddle, for remembering the X's and O's, for remembering what the topic is of our presentation. So when our amygdala hijacks that portion, we can't use that portion. When we look on a CT scan and look at the brain of someone who's experiencing like those types of nerves, our amygdala, or hippocampus doesn't show up. But our monkey brain is firing. And again, that sucker works at 5 times the speed. So it's hard to manage. Does that make sense? When our amygdala fires up, when our amygdala's really energized, we're unable to use that hippocampus and unable to use that rational, factual, relatively traditional, normal thinking. Does that make sense? So why do we care about all this? Why all this background? I want to get across the point that your brain is biologically wired for you to not feel confident. It's biologically wired to when things are getting hairy, games getting down to the wire, like we're getting close to the semester, that your brain is biologically wired to interpret danger and respond in a way that's not helpful for you, whether you like it or not. To where that lack of confidence is completely normal. But what we're going to do is talk about ways that we can work with our brain to build up that confidence and find ways, are we going to go from 0 level of confidence to 10? Probably not. I'm not that good. But if we can get from a 3 to a 7, or a 4 to a 6, that's where this stuff is powerful. So we're going to break down this in a few ways. We're going to develop our own little reset process for our brain and our body. We're going to discuss body language, factual thinking, mastering our ape, and then this idea of confidence and courage. If you get anything from this workshop, I want you to remember this slide. This is arguably the most important thing, and we do it with almost all of our athletes. It's this reset process. Because whether you're a Division I athlete or you're about to take, do you guys still take the ACT? Yeah. So you might experience some nerves there. To whether it's crunch time or the ACT, we need a reset process because our emotions are going to get big, our thoughts are going to get big, and we don't want to take that test when we're all out of whack and our monkey brain's taking over. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to acknowledge that we're nervous. And that might sound kind of funny because we don't want to, typically when I work with people, they say, Tanner, by acknowledging that, doesn't it make it real? And I say, absolutely yes. Our brain is complex and silly. I said it's stupid earlier. It's also really smart. We can't trick it all the time. And so we need to acknowledge when these feelings are there. We need to acknowledge that, hey, I'm nervous right now. We need to acknowledge, hey, my leg's tapping pretty quick right now and my heart's pounding. And by doing those things, we jump into this next section, which is the reset. So, when we reset, we're resetting our brain and our body. And this is the most crucial part, okay? So we're gonna do a little bit of breathing here. How many breaths, not right now, I'll tell you when. How many breaths do you think you take a minute? If you had to guess. Did I hear 20? You're right. We take about 20 to 30 breaths every minute. I've been up here for about 35 minutes. I'm not going to do the math of 22 times 34, but you can do that. What is it?
500.
It's 500 and something. What was it? You've taken 748 breaths in the last 35 minutes, but with that, you probably haven't been conscious for that. And that's because your brain is really great, that it doesn't have to focus on breathing, which is awesome, because it'd be a pain in the butt if we had to take a breath every single time, every handful of seconds. But our brain just does that for us. But what do you think happens when our amygdala kicks in and our monkey brain starts to show up? What happens to that breathing? It speeds up and it gets really shallow, which I'm sure we've all seen people where they're breathing like, and then all of a sudden they find themselves hyperventilating, their monkey brain's going crazy, and then all of a sudden we're in a place where we can't take that ACT. We can't perform the way we want. We can't give that presentation. We can't have that conversation. So all of a sudden, we've kind of lost control. What I'm going to work with you today on this reset process is to stop that process from that amygdala from taking over. So first and foremost, we got to get control of that breath. And now I'll kind of lead you through that. We often don't think about our breath as something that we have to take control over, but if we want to perform the way we want, we got to control every factor. So right now, I'm going to lead you through a little bit of breathing. I know it sounds silly. I'm going to teach you how to breathe. But I want you to put your hand on either your chest or your belly. You choose. I want you to start with a big inhale through your nose. And I release that through the mouth. Notice how either your breath or how your chest or belly maybe decompresses. And as we do this next inhale, it gets a little bit bigger. Go into that inhale, and then go into the exhale. Do a few more. Do it on your own time. Notice how you can feel your body start to work with the breath. And with that, we're going to jump into our senses. So when we can take control of our breath, again, we're not doing this because we think that's what Tanner tells us to do. We're doing this because we're choosing which part of our brain we want to control. And when we get kind of into that more cool, calm, relaxed state, we're going to jump into our senses. What are the 5 senses? Touch, taste, smell, sight, hear. So now I'll ask you, over the last 40 minutes, you probably haven't noticed the sensation of the socks on your feet. Probably not. Or sandals, you got me. But now I'll ask you, which shoe's tighter, left or right? Now, how many of you have heard the hum of the light over the last, okay, good majority of you. Have you noticed how much saliva is in your mouth? Have you tasted the taste of your gum that you may be chewing? I want you to take a second and notice your posture. Yeah, so all of you just fix your posture. Yep. Why do you think I ask you these questions? To make you think? Get your mind on something else? Anything else? So when we use our senses and we use our breath, it allows us to activate that professor brain. It allows us to activate that hippocampus. Because when your brain's great to where you don't have to focus on breathing. You don't have to focus about the feeling of the socks on your feet when I'm talking or when you're in class. You're not focused on, I don't know, different sounds or sights. But when you're able to get focused, the idea of focusing is to block out other things, right? Now your brain focuses for you, especially when your amygdala gets fired up. Your brain will shift things to focusing on the danger. Because remember, when your brain, remember we talked about being chased by the bear? When you're being chased by a bear, do you think you notice the blueberries that you walk by or run by? Do you notice the acorn that you just stepped on? No, because your adrenaline is pumping. You are fired up and your sole focus is to be safe. And when you notice danger, your job for your brain is to keep you safe. And like I said, when your brain, whether it's being chased by a bear or it's the fourth quarter at homecoming or the fifth set at homecoming or the cross-country meet this weekend, your brain doesn't know the difference between like the danger of a bear chasing you and the danger of an athletic event, but it just turns your amygdala on. Does that make sense? Okay. And if those two don't get you grounded and centered, we're going to jump into these next two, which is I want you to pick and choose which one works best for you. It can be a verbal mantra or it can be a physical task. I've had athletes that they'll come up with a phrase that works for them. It might be confidence. It might be trust. It might be, I don't know. You get to choose that. That's what I love about this. You get to find that phrase. I've also had athletes that will do a physical task. How many of you watch baseball or softball? Some. How many of you have noticed after each pitch, a lot of batters will adjust their batting gloves? Yeah. When I used to work with professional baseball players, they didn't do that because their hand was uncomfortable. That was their physical reset. For every pitch, they would go through this process, they would adjust their batting glove, and that was their physical reset so they could get centered and ready for the next pitch. So as simple as it sounds, like we mentioned in the very beginning, we're just doing a physical task. I have athletes that will adjust the shin guards during play. They will take their mouth guard out, chew it for a second, put it back in. They will untie their tennis shoes and retie them. They'll do whatever it takes. It might sound silly, but it's this idea of resetting. This is the idea that we can let go of what happened and go into the next thing with something fresh. Does that make sense? So like I said, that step 2 is the meat and potatoes of our conversation today. And then again, this third step, remember how we talked about with our focus, what happens to our focus when our amygdala is turned on? When we notice danger, what happens to our focus? Yeah, it goes way down. It gets really focused on things that don't matter. So what we need to do is we need to give it something to focus on. Now, I'll ask you. I need you to just do as I do right now, but I want you to not think about a purple elephant. What's the first thing you thought about? Purple elephant. To where I want you to give your brain some direction. And I don't want it to be, okay, just don't hit this serve into the net. Or, okay, don't jump off sides here. I want it to be something like we're giving our brain something to do. Maybe we're hitting the serve into a certain portion of the court. Maybe we are focusing on the hard count, whatever it might be. We're giving our brain something to focus on, but not what we don't want to focus on. Does that make sense? Okay. And then again, we're going to repeat this process. And we're going to repeat it again and again and again, because this is a skill just like anything else. The first time you played a sport or hopped in the classroom, your brain has to learn this stuff and it has to adjust to this before it can actually do its magic. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is the nuts and bolts of what we got to do. How many of you have heard the idea of fake it till you make it? Yeah, some of us. What if I told you that was kind of true? Now, I don't think that's where like true, authentic confidence comes from. But when we look at research, remember when I talked about doing my body language up against the wall here versus being out here? Even if we don't feel confident, if we display confidence, if I roll my shoulders back, if I smile, if I act big, if I talk with my hands, we can tell that over 5 to 10 minutes, my confidence increases. Even if I didn't do anything, or if I didn't like change the way I was thinking, we can trick our brain into thinking that we're confident based on how we display our body. It's a quick, easy, simple way to add some confidence. So that might look like, I know we all fixed our posture earlier, but it might look like fixing our posture, big body language, getting big, smiling. We notice that when we do these things, we decrease that stress hormone in our body and we get more dopamine. And dopamine is that brain chemical that makes us feel good. We want more of that when we're performing. Any questions about that? Again, we have 80,000 thoughts a day. If I had to guess, you all are probably having about 100 or so thousand thoughts a day. 60% of those are bound to be unhelpful. And so I want us to normalize the idea of having a thought that doesn't help us. It's normal to have negative self-talk. Now, do we want to listen to it? No, because there's a difference between thoughts and beliefs. Thoughts are quite literally just a chemical response in your brain. We get a lot of them all the time, but that doesn't mean we have to believe them. We do have a choice, and we can perform even if we don't feel good. We don't have to feel awesome to perform awesome. There's time and time again of athletes performing and having incredible accomplishments, and when you interview them after the game, they say, kind of felt like crap before the game, I'll be honest. And I've done the same thing with our athletes, that we don't have to feel good. Often, can I give you all a critique? We focus too much on confidence. I think we can go to the next one. Can you go one more? And we're going to go back to this. We focus too much on confidence and not enough on courage. One of my frustrations with confidence is a feeling word. If I told you all now to laugh or to be happy, do you think you could do that? No, because it wouldn't be authentic, right? Wouldn't be real. Just the same way, like I don't want confidence unless it's real. To where I want us to focus on actions. I want us to focus on this premise of courage. And again, courage and mental toughness doesn't guarantee us anything. We can still hit the ball into the net. We can still throw an interception. We can still bomb the test. But when we lean into courage, it allows us to be confident. When we do courageous things, when we lean into the idea of, someone mentioned earlier this idea of confidence is doing something hard, regardless of how difficult it might be. That we still take action. And that's where confidence is built, is through action. Whether it's this reset process or it's what we'll do next, confidence is built through action. Yeah, you can go back. Do you remember when we talked about that monkey brain? So as we talk through this, I want us to think about, we're going to use ape to master our monkey brain. When we talked about the monkey brain, how our focus gets all out of whack, right? We focus on the wrong things at the wrong time. Ape allows us to get more centered. It's this idea of we focus on our attitude, our preparation, and our effort. Frankly, those are the only three things you can control at a given time. And so when we lean into those, it simplifies sport. It simplifies performance, and it simplifies, like we said, whether performance is a test or performing on the field, we want to simplify things because when our amygdala is firing, things get complex. So again, we're going to focus on the attitude. What kind of attitude do we want? not a trick question. What kind of attitude do we want? Positive. Yeah, a helpful one. And again, we'll go into preparation. We might focus on, hey, what things do we studied for in that prior to this test? How much film did we watch before this event? Are we listening to our coach? Are we focused during practice? And then lastly, effort. How much can I give in the next 40 seconds? We don't have to focus on giving everything we have to the entire game right this moment, because frankly, that's how we get our amygdala going, is when we think in those big thoughts, we're going to get big emotions. But how much can you give in the next 20 to 40 seconds? Again, my job isn't super flashy, but it's the idea of making sport and performance simple. Lastly, this idea of confidence, it's hard. It ebbs and it flows. Remember how we talked about confidence changes from setting to personality. It's normal for us to feel confident at one point and then not confident at the next. So don't think of, oh, I'm not confident today, something must be wrong. Nope, you're just human, and that's okay. You're battling up against years of biology, years of development, and so it's difficult to be mentally tough. It's difficult to be confident. But like we talked about today, we have tools that we can use that make confidence easier to navigate. Confidence is difficult. I want to highlight this premise here. Low confidence leads to anxiety, to where I want us to lean into the idea that, remember that confidence gap we talked about? I don't want us to think about managing that expectation and lowering that expectation. But I want us to get comfortable with the gap, acknowledging the gap, and taking action regardless. Because like we said, we talked about the tools that we have to navigate that gap. And that's where sport and performance is one. So as we kind of wrap up today, we went through a lot of different things. We talked about what confidence is. We tried to understand it, talking about how our brain's software is kind of imperfect. We talked about that 3-step process, our body language. We talked about factual thinking, our attitude and preparation and effort. And then this is difficult. Again, it's normal to not feel confident in sport, but we have actionable tools that we can use to do something about it. Finally, mental toughness and confidence are biologically difficult. Like we said, I want you to lean into and notice, hey, when's your monkey brain acting up? And what can we do to activate that professor brain? Because when we think of sport like that, it makes it simple. And sport doesn't have to be complex. Performance doesn't have to be complex. But when we use these skills, we take some power back from these really big emotions. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Alrighty, that's all I got. Best of luck to all of you this year. Compete your butts off.